This is where most people quit. Not at the breaking point, not when everything falls apart in one dramatic moment, but right here, when nothing is happening at all. When life doesn't look bad enough to give up, it doesn't look hopeful enough to keep believing. This is the quiet middle, and it empties more faith than any storm ever could. Because silence is harder than pain. Pain gives you a reason. Silence gives you questions, and unanswered questions slowly drain your strength. You don't stop believing all at once. You stop expecting. You stop leaning forward. You stop praying with anticipation, and faith begins to fade without making noise. Most people don't quit by walking away. They quit by staying physically present while checking out internally. They still say the right words, still show up, still claim faith. But deep down, they've already prepared themselves for disappointment. They tell themselves it's maturity, but it's actually self-protection. Before we go any further, subscribe to this channel. Not because this message is easy to hear, but because this channel is for people who don't walk away when faith stops being comfortable. If you're still listening, you already belong here. This season is dangerous because it feels ordinary. Nothing dramatic is happening. No crisis, no miracle. Just repetition. Just obedience without reward. Just showing up again and again with no visible progress. And that's where most people decide it's not worth the effort anymore. They were taught how to follow God when prayers are answered quickly. They were taught how to celebrate blessings. They were taught how to testify when things turn around. But they were never taught how to stay when God goes quiet. They were never taught how to obey without emotional reinforcement. So when silence comes, they assume something is wrong. They assume they missed God. They assume they failed. Or worse, they assume God has moved on without them. And instead of waiting, they retreat. This is where doubt doesn't attack loudly. It sounds reasonable. It sounds mature. It sounds like wisdom. It says things like, maybe I expected too much, or maybe this just isn't my season, or maybe God helps others, but not me. And because nothing contradicts those thoughts immediately, they start to feel true. This is where faith becomes heavy, where prayer feels forced, where obedience feels pointless. And this is exactly where most people stop pushing forward. Not because they don't love God, but because loving God here costs more than they planned to pay. They didn't expect faith to feel this lonely. They didn't expect doing the right thing to feel unrewarded. They didn't expect growth to feel invisible. And when faith stops feeling powerful, many people walk away quietly. This is the stage where compromise wears the mask of balance, where lowering standards feels like peace, where stepping back feels like rest. Slowly, subtly, devotion gets replaced with convenience, And people tell themselves God understands while drifting further than they realize. Here's the truth that changes everything. God often removes emotional confirmation before he releases visible fulfillment. Not because he's distant, but because he's refining. Not because he's silent, but because he's watching what you'll do without reassurance. Faith that only survives on feeling isn't faith. It's dependence on emotion. Real faith stands when there's no feedback, no applause, no clarity. Real faith chooses obedience when it would be easier to stop trying. This is where God stops explaining himself, where he doesn't answer every question, where he lets you walk without knowing the outcome. And this is not abandonment. This is training. Most people never realize that silence is not absence. It's preparation. It's the space where God strengthens what can't be built in noise. It's where endurance is formed, not excitement. And many people don't survive this phase. They drift instead. They pull back slowly. They stop expecting because expecting hurts. They convince themselves they're at peace when really they've settled. But if you're still here, it's because something in you refuses to leave quietly. You don't understand everything, but you're still listening. You don't feel strong, but you're still standing. You don't see progress, but you haven't turned back. That matters more than you think, because this is the stage where progress becomes internal instead of visible, where God stops changing your situation and starts changing you, where growth moves underground, where no one can applaud it. Roots don't grow where people are watching. They grow in darkness. And if God is keeping you unseen right now, it's because being seen too early would damage what he's building. This is the moment where shortcuts become tempting, where old habits feel safer, where past versions of you seem easier to return to, where going back feels more predictable than moving forward blind. And many people do go back, not because they're weak, but because uncertainty feels unbearable. But what they don't realize is that what feels like delay is actually alignment. What feels like nothing is actually construction. If you quit here, you'll never know how close you were. You'll never see what was forming behind the silence. You'll never meet the version of you that only exists on the other side of endurance. This is where most people quit, and that is exactly why so few ever reach what they prayed for. Not because God withholds blessings, but because most people refuse to walk without guarantees. If you're still listening, this message was never meant to comfort you. It was meant to confront something inside you, to ask whether you're staying because you believe or leaving because you're tired. Because only those who remain when nothing makes sense are trusted with what finally does. And if you're still here at the end of this, then you're already doing what most people won't. You're staying, and that alone sets you apart.